Hi, I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Sophie, and we are here to help guide you to the why behind your wellness why.
Come join us on our journey. Hey, Sophie. Good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Hi, Chelsea. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It is pouring down rain here in North Carolina. So just hopefully we keep our connection because we've also been losing our power a lot. So I'm hoping we can get through this podcast today. But I'm excited to talk to you more about what we're going to talk about today. So, today we are going to dive a little bit into our journeys with our personal relationships with diet and exercise. A long time ago, if you guys have been listening for a while, we had a couple of podcasts at the beginning where we talked about our whys, and this is going into a little bit more depth on that. So, talking through our journeys, not only as a personal trainer and a dietitian, but our personal relationships with diet and exercise, our journeys through childhood, high school, college, where we are now, and how our job has impacted our relationship with diet and exercise. The reason that we're doing this is because we find a lot of people struggle with being stuck in their journeys and feeling like, I'm in this habit. It's so hard to change habits. I feel like because I'm an adult, I feel like I can never make a change. This is just who I am. And hopefully, through going through this, it will encourage you that even though we are professionals in these areas, that we have our own journeys and they are ever changing. And personally, mine has even changed over the past couple of years. So we can talk a little bit about that. So, Sophie, let's get right into it. Do you want to start off and tell everybody a little bit about where your journey started with diet and exercise? I know it's sometimes hard to think back to when we were young, but talk a little bit about your childhood and how nutrition and food and exercise played a role in your life.
Oh, yeah, it was there. When I was younger, let me just start with that I was so unathletic and wanted to eat all the foods that maybe aren't the best for
Did you
you.
say unathletic?
Yeah.
I cannot even picture that. You're so athletic now. I always pictured you as this like little athletic Sophie just running around.
Oh, yeah. Like, I always laugh and I'm like, oh, if my brother like could vouch for me like 10 years ago, no one would think I would be where I am right now. But
That's so funny.
so yeah, this when I was way younger, like 10, I was a little chubster and I didn't participate in like any sports. I think I played youth soccer like 1 year and I touched the ball once and I like assisted the ball in the goal, which even if I didn't touch it, it would have gone in the goal anyway, it like doesn't count. Like so bad. Um, and I just, yeah, I was in like La La Land. Wasn't into sports like at all, even though I was the biggest tomboy on earth and followed my brother and mom around to all of his baseball games. So that was fun. And I would just eat sunflower seeds for 3 hours at his games. And so that's kind of how my fitness journey started. It didn't really begin until middle school. So my mom ran at Drake her freshman year. And then it's a whole other thing. The cross country and track coach was weighing the athletes. None of the girls were getting their periods. So then she was like, I'm not coming back as a sophomore. Good for her. She ran a little bit as a sophomore and then transferred. But back to me, she and I started run walking when I was in middle school in sixth grade. I live in Lincoln Park. We would walk down Dickens and then jog around Oz Park. I think we started with like one lap and I was dying. And she tore her ACL in like 2002 or 3. So this was for the both of us and slowly worked up to like 3 or 4 laps and I started beating her. And I was like, wow, this feels amazing. I feel empowered. Like, I like this. And I remember being at one of my brother's high school baseball games, and he, or one of the older sisters of the guys, was in the crowd with us and was like, Sophie, like, I heard you run. Like, you should join Ignatius Cross Country, like, whatever. And we'll talk about it a little later, but I ended up doing it even though I was like so nervous and embarrassed. But then to my food journey, I'm lucky that my mom always cooked growing up, but probably a little scarring. I would go to France every summer and winter to see my French family growing up for a couple weeks. And there was a rule that I didn't really like. So my dad made my plate, which was probably a portion for an adult, not a child. And I wasn't allowed to leave the dinner table until my plate was clean. And I was like alone eating in the kitchen. Don't really love that. But like, other than that, that's kind of how it started. How was your journey when you were younger, Chelsea?
Yeah, I just want to, before I talk about mine, I think something that I work with my clients a lot with, and even just like through my personal journey, is looking at our childhood and seeing if it does have an impact on our food and exercise habits now. So you gave a really great example of the clean plate method type of thing.
Yep.
And for some individuals, I definitely don't want to be like, oh my gosh, like every single person who is told to finish their plate is scarred for life. But little things like that can, really play a huge role in how we eat. Super, super short story, real quick, about a client. She was telling me one time that growing up, her family was like very, very, very strict when it came to their eating habits. Mom had really strict eating habits in terms of not keeping processed food in the house. The children ate a lot of homemade meals. There wasn't things with a lot of preservatives, colorings, all of that type of stuff. And then every year they would go on a week-long beach vacation. And in that beach vacation, it was kind of like all hell broke loose. The parents fully took away the food rules. They could eat whatever they wanted. And to this day, she still struggles with going on vacation because of this all or nothing mentality. Even now that she's in her 40s, she's realizing with her own kids kind of like the negative impact that mindset had on her. But it is really interesting that your childhood can have such an impact on your journey with all of it. So just had to state that.
That's crazy. But like, I do have to say, I did leave out, my mom had a rule, but I liked this rule: no soda in the house except in the summer or at birthday parties. And like, we, to be honest, didn't grow up with like those mini donuts in our house and like gushers and whatever. But like, there wasn't like a hard rule, like, but I did eat them when I went to my friend's house, of course. But like, honestly, that didn't bother me. And I think that did almost kind of help me in a way, but
Yeah. And every person's so different. You do hear, and
totally.
that's why I said I don't want to like say what's right or
Yeah.
wrong, because you're exactly right. Like there's some individuals who grew up with things not in their household, and that has had a positive impact now just because they've never had it in their household. And there's other individuals where it wasn't in their household and it wasn't quote unquote allowed, and it was so restrictive
Yeah.
that now that they're an adult, they always want to have it because as a child, they weren't allowed to have it. So I agree. At my childhood, I was in a very similar state. I was really fortunate. My mom stayed at home with my brother and I, and so she cooked all of our meals. I was one of those kids who got home from school and like snack ready to go, dinner hot on the table. Like we ate as a family. Now, of course, when we started getting older and sports and all that type of stuff, it was a little bit harder to eat as a family, but it was really great to have like home cooked meals and all of that type of stuff. I feel like when it comes to food in my journey, looking back, there are a lot of things more, I would say, in high school and college that we'll get into that I definitely is like, wow, probably not the best relationship when it comes to things. But in terms of like childhood, I do have to say I'm really fortunate that I don't have anything that like really sticks out in terms of like this had a huge impact on my life now. Again, I will say looking back, unfortunately, within my family and my extended family, there's a ton of medical conditions. I talk about this on my website. I think I talked about this in the beginning of our podcast, but heart disease, diabetes, obesity, cancers, you name it, someone in my family, unfortunately, probably has struggled with it or currently struggles with it. And so growing up, I was surrounded by that. And so very early on, I kind of even though I feel like at the time, of course, when you're a kid, you don't really know what to do with that information. But again, as I, got older into high school and college, it definitely started having an impact on how I wanted to live my life and seeing the struggles they were going through as an adult. I knew I didn't want to go through. So I would say when I was really young, I don't recall anything in terms of like food, but definitely starting to get into like middle school, high school, college is when it had started having more of an impact. In terms of exercise, so growing up, I also was a part of a lot of different sports. I feel like I was the very traditional, like tried soccer, was horrible at that. We're still to this day, we'll never forget that I did not make the middle school basketball team. Sad face. So
Oh.
I also was not very athletic when it came to it's always a running joke in my family because like all of the guys in my family, my dad played football in college, my brother played football in college, my cousins played football in college, so on and so forth. But any sport that had a ball or a bat or any type of equipment, I did not succeed in. Now, I did grow up dancing, so that I definitely stuck with that. And again, because it had nothing to do with a ball, I was very, very good at that. And same with running. So, track, I didn't stick with as long as I wish I would have, but I definitely am better when it comes to more of of those types of sports. But same type of thing. I mean, when I was younger, movement was always looked at as fun. Again, I was very thankful and fortunate with my family and my parents that they weren't pushy when it came to sports. It was kind of like, oh, you don't like soccer, totally fine. We're not going to force you to continue it. I really stuck with dance because I enjoyed it, not because I was forced with it. So I was very fortunate with that. Again, the exercise I think started having more of an impact in high school and college, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So I'd love to know from you now, since we're getting more into our journeys in high school and college, how did your relationship with nutrition and exercise start to adjust when you were a little bit older?
So, like I said about running in high school, I was such a shy kid. It's not even funny. Never would have thought I would have a podcast. But here we are.
Here we
Uh,
are.
yeah.
Also,
I,
same though, I have to throw that in there. Like to this day, I feel like
right?
we're still to this day kind of introverted. Like what do they call it? Extroverted introverts or whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
I feel like both of us like to be social and are people not people pleasers, but people in terms of like we both work with people, but at the end of the day, we also need our alone time.
Oh,
So
100%.
I'm very much the same way and was growing up.
Oh, yeah. Like I didn't want to run in high school because I was so shy. I didn't want anyone to watch me run. And like my family was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah." They were like, "You have to do it." I was like, "Okay." I remember walking up to the track the first day of cross country at St. Ignatius College Prep in Chicago, Illinois, and I was like having a heart attack and like hyperventilating, and but it was great. We ran like 3 miles that day, and I survived and fell in love with the sport. I ended up doing track because again, at the end of cross country, I was like, I'm not doing track. I was like, I do not want people to watch me run in a circle. I was like, at least in cross country, I'm like running through the woods, but like on a track, you can see me my whole race. I was like, no shot, I'm running. I ran and I think I got the coaches award that year, or maybe my sophomore year. I don't remember. And the coach announced and chuckled about how the athlete I'm giving this to told me she wasn't going to run track because she didn't want anyone to watch her running around the track. And that was me. Um, but, and then I continued my junior year. I got real hungry with running, and I was like, I'd like to run in college. I ended up running through college and loved it. Did both cross country and track. And like I liked it enough and I tried my best, but I also had a good balance. Like I wanted to live life. I think that's why part of the reason I went D3, like I could have gone D1, but in the classroom too, I just didn't want to be a number. But anyways, um, we'll get to post school later. And then my journey with nutrition in high school, I feel like I brought my lunch most of the time, but I honestly couldn't tell you what it was. I feel like maybe a turkey sandwich with the skin peeled off. My mom like knew I didn't like that. Um, but I
Skin
also
off what? The turkey?
like turkey, like the turkey, yeah, like the
What? Like deli turkey? You peeled the skin off of it?
yeah.
That's
Um,
funny. That's also, are you still like that? Do you still peel the skin off turkey?
it depends. It depends. Um, but luckily I ate lunch food too, like Bosco sticks. Oh my God, I know multiple high schools had those like cheese
Oh
sticks
yeah.
that were like the size of my forearm, like filled with like a gallon of cheese.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right?
I liked those too.
Like so good. Like high school, I feel like I ate whatever I want, and I don't honestly remember. Totally neutral, good relationship. Slightly picky eater. I should mention, like when I was younger, my brother always talks about how I would have Doritos for breakfast, but whatever. Um, and only eat grilled cheese. But then in college, I lived in a sorority sophomore, junior, and part of senior year that luckily we had a chef, and I made sure every day I had a salad. We had a salad bar. Didn't mind it. I just wanted to make sure I mean, I was a college athlete, that I was getting my veggies in. I do think that post college, which we'll get into that, kind of burnt me out from salads just because I literally had salad like 365 days a year in college.
Mm.
But I was running so much that I like didn't really worry about it too much. Like bringing body image into the picture, my sophomore or junior year of college, I think it was my sophomore year, I got really good at the 400 and I started lifting weights more, which I really liked. But my thighs got bigger. I remember in the spring when I put on jean shorts and I was like, whoa, these were a little tough to get around my thighs. But I turned it, and sometimes I still have to do this. I turned it into I am running the fast as I ever have, and that's where my body is taking me, and it's amazing. And I just have a little extra muscle on here, and that's kind of how I
That's
dealt with that.
awesome. That's awesome as, because again, I feel like so many people at that young of an age, and I'll get into my journey with that, but it's like you sometimes can't put that together in terms of realizing that. So that's awesome that you were able to do that.
I mean, like, I feel like running, I don't know what it was. And I think it started again when I was kind of in middle school running with my mom. I was like, wow, my body is like this powerful machine. And like, let's see how fast it can go and like where it can take me. So I always reframed that like the few times I was kind of like, oh, my thighs are a little bit big during because I wasn't used to it. Like, because cross country, I feel like my body was different than in track because cross country was 6K, track, I was 400, 800.
Hmm.
So, like, a little, faster muscle twitch. My legs were a little bit bigger, but yeah, I'm lucky I was able to do that at that age.
Yeah, that's huge. That's awesome. Very cool.
Tell us about your high school and college journey, Chelsea.
Yeah. So high school is actually when I can't remember if I said this in the beginning podcast, but high school is actually when I decided I wanted to be a dietitian, which I think is kind of funny because a lot of people don't think about their career. And I'll never forget, it was either sophomore or junior year, I can't remember, in chemistry class is actually like when I even discovered what a dietitian was. So when I learned about what a dietitian was, I instantly really wanted to work with eating disorders. And looking back on that, I was never diagnosed with an eating disorder. I never truly feel like I had a true eating disorder, but I definitely had disordered eating. And a lot of it was in terms of portions. Again, not anorexia by any means, but I definitely associated eat less, be skinnier. That was kind of like what was in my head. And I think a lot of that probably played a role from dance. Again, I was fortunate in the sense of, I didn't have a bad experience with dance. I wasn't weighed, or there's some horror stories when it comes to the dance industry. So I was fortunate with that. But I will say, I think it was self comparison. So I was one of the taller ones of my friends going through puberty. I did just like many other individuals. Like once I got my period, I got boobs, I got a butt, and I had curves on me. And so I think it wasn't so much of other people putting pressure on me, yet myself putting pressure on me and kind of equating that typical dancer's mindset. Well, to be a dancer, you have to be light, you have to be thin, you have to fit into these outfits, especially with costumes. I mean, like with our dance recitals, those were in the spring, and we ordered our costumes in the summer or late or early fall of like the year before. So you had to be able to fit into whatever costume you were measured at, which is hard in high school because again, some people are still their bodies are changing a lot. And so I think it was a lot of self-comparison. There are definitely, again, as I mentioned before, things looking back, such as like my mom would pack me a lunch and I wouldn't eat part of what was in my lunch and I would throw it away and it would look like I had ate it. Or at the time, I don't think I was meaning to do this, but looking back, it's like, oh, that maybe was a little bit of disordered eating. So my brother always makes fun of me because whenever my mom made like cookies or brownies or something like that, I would take teeny tiny bites. Like I would cut like an inch square, but then I would have like 20 of it. But in my head, it was like, well, I'm eating this teeny tiny piece. And then if I would eat a teeny tiny piece and then like an hour later go back for another teeny tiny piece, it wouldn't add up, quote unquote, or things like that. So I didn't continue dance into college. So I think that my mindset for the positive did change going into college. But of course, as you had mentioned too, like college, there's whole other challenges. I also was in a sorority, again, like around great women. So I don't want to like say a sorority was a bad experience. It actually was a really good experience for me. But same type of thing. I mean, you're around other women in a sorority, you get t-shirts and clothes and you share clothes with your friends. And again, there's always kind of that self-comparison. Well, like, could I fit into her clothes or not? And, kind of back and forth with that. So that's kind of where my relationship, I would say, probably was my lowest when it comes to food and exercise, because I wasn't starving myself. I wasn't doing any of that. Honestly, when I was eating food, it wasn't the healthiest. I wasn't, only eating salads or only eating vegetables. I actually was eating very, like you said, like I would also sometimes have Doritos for a meal. I would drink so much Gatorade and lemonade and orange juice that it was like so sugar loaded. So it wasn't necessarily that I was trying to be health conscious in terms of what I was eating. I definitely had the mindset of what impacts your size is how much you eat, and how much you exercise impacts that as well. So that's when I started to, try to run longer distances, because the conversation that we had, I definitely fell into: you run more, you burn more calories. You burn more calories, you lose weight. And I did not need to lose weight by any means, but it kind of like all associated with it. I think part of me too, like I was saying in the beginning, is this is when my fear really struck of seeing what was going on in my extended family, of just not wanting to go down that route. I was so fearful of gaining weight because I didn't want to go down the path of obesity. I didn't want to have diabetes. I didn't want to have high blood pressure. And so I think I kind of took that to the extreme in high school. But becoming a dietitian, I think honestly is what saved me, because that's when I became educated. Going into that, I still definitely struggled with some of that throughout college, but I do have to say it definitely got better through that. And then, of course, thankfully, even got better into my journey starting as a dietitian and until now. So that's just a little bit about my high school and college journey.
I love that. My lowest point was probably right after college, um, when I was like looking to become a physical therapist. I was being stupid. I was dating a guy, and I just like really wanted a six pack. And of course, my thought and way to get a six pack was to not eat that much. So post college, I had disordered eating for sure. I was super restrictive. I don't know that I had anorexia. I was never diagnosed, kind of like you said, but it was kind of a control thing, very much so for me, which I know everybody's different. Because I felt like my life at the time was a little chaotic, post college, trying to go to physical therapy school, also taking Chem 1 because I needed a couple prereqs. And, but that disordered eating lasted like 6 to 8 months.
When you say, I don't mean to interrupt you, but when you say control, do you mean like that was an area you could control? So you kind of took that to an extreme. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, since I can't control other parts of my life, I'm going to control how much and when I eat. And it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be a lot less than I should be.
A lot of people struggle with that. I mean, so many people struggle with that. And I think there's a balance that can be found, because I think control is a really tricky word, because it can be used in like a positive and a negative way. So many people struggle with that control of like, okay, I can't control any other areas of my life. Let me control my food, which can sometimes be a good thing in terms of like you have responsibility over like how to fuel your body and what to eat. But there's a fine line, because a lot of people take it to that extreme of like being too controlling over it. So I understand 100% what you mean.
Oh, 100%. And mine wasn't the good kind. With that, like exercise, being after college, being a college athlete, like no longer, like definitely I feel like is a struggle. And I know I'm not the only one to deal with that. Like I've spoken to other people, like you lose and miss your team, which is tough. And you really identify with that. Luckily, running is easy and you can do it alone. And like, oh, runners tend to be interesting because the sport is kind of alone. You're in your brain all by yourself. I very much so worked on losing the guilt of skipping days of running. It took me like 2 years to not get that pit in my stomach for skipping a day,
Mm.
um, which was tough, but good. It's kind of like exposure therapy. And I exposed myself to that uncomfortable feeling and I sat with it. I was like, I don't want to run today. It won't be a good run. And I feel uncomfortable not running, but I'm not going to do it anyways. When I became a trainer a year after I graduated, so August 2016, almost coming up on 6 years, which was exciting.
Woohoo.
Yes. I also was like, oh my God, I need to lift weights every day. Luckily, I did the same thing that I did with running. I got a hold of those reins. I sat with the guilt. I don't have that anymore. I don't get upset and it doesn't ruin my day at all if I skip a day of lifting or even two. I'm like, you know what? There's tomorrow. We're all okay.
So I went through the exact same thing. So as I had mentioned, I didn't dance in college, but I guess I should have also added on not dancing. I kind of went through this similar thing that you had mentioned. And I was dancing so much, literally from when I was like 3 or 4 all the way up until freshman year of college. And then to go from like dancing every week, multiple days a week, your whole life to like not doing it at all. Instead of course, continuing dancing, I turned that into working out all the time and not a healthy workout. I mean, I would, in my head, this is again where like it was a challenge with more of comparison and just education. I just truly think it was an educational not knowing because growing up, I mean, especially in high school, there were some days I would have so I was on the high school dance team and then I also danced at a studio as well. So I would have dance team after school for a couple of hours and then I would go home, have like a super quick dinner, and then I would be at the dance studio for hours that night. So there were days that I was working out or exercising or whatever you want to call it with dance for 5, 6 plus hours in a short amount of time. And so going to college, it was like, oh my goodness, you hear of the freshman 15 and gaining weight. And I was so fearful of that and again, like just family history, I didn't want to go down that path, that I definitely turned that into having to exercise for a long amount of time. It was a lot of cardio, lots of running, lots of treadmill, lots of elliptical, no strength training, which if I could change one thing, I would have started strength training way earlier in my life. But then post college, it kind of continued. I was the same way. I would feel guilty for not exercising. And I think my journey with exercise really took a positive turn after I actually got hip surgery. I think that was the turning point for me. So in 2000 and I think it was 17, I had a labral tear in my hip and had hip surgery and I couldn't work out after that. I mean, I went to physical therapy and I personally think that is a workout in itself, especially post surgery, but I couldn't do what I was used to doing. I couldn't run long runs. I couldn't work out for a long period of time. And I was truly forced to not do the exercise. And that had such a switch on my mindset in a positive way because I realized, okay, my body, it definitely changed, don't get me wrong, but I think that was the turning point for me where I was like, this is such a proven sign with what my body ended up doing with the changes ended up going through that I was over exercising and under eating. Like I didn't even know I needed more necessarily until I had surgery and until I started doing resting metabolic rate test on myself to really see what my metabolism was. And like I said, that was between like 2016 and 2017. And I think that event of me having a hip surgery, like getting to, and I would even call that rock bottom because it definitely wasn't rock bottom. It wasn't a horrible, like, oh my gosh, like this horrible surgery type of thing. It was just more of like, an eye-opening experience of like, wow, I'm not treating my body the way that it should be treated at this time. I mean, I was like in my early to mid 20s and I was what, 20, I don't know, I'd have to do the math now. I'm 29. So how I was however old and I was like, oh my goodness, like I am getting a kind of big hip surgery in my 20s. And I know if that happens, I know people get that done, but it was a wake up call of like, I'm not treating my body the way that it should be. And I think that's when it really took a positive turn in terms of my nutrition. So I started fueling more, I started exercising way less. And not even, I mean, it was way less in terms of like the amount of time, but just properly. So that's really where I started adding strength training in. It wasn't about, how many calories I burned. It was how my body felt, working on recovery, working on mobility. And yeah, that's kind of where it took a huge turn in my journey with everything.
It sounds like we lived a little bit in parallel, Chelsea.
Totally. I know. Which is funny because we met, when did you start working at the gym?
It's very soon after your hip surgery.
After my hip surgery. Okay.
I want to say April 2018, I think.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Um, which is funny. That's when I was exercising a little too much. It wasn't until I like left FFC, I was doing legs like 6 days a week. Yeah, I know I'm crazy. But it's funny because I noticed how much stronger I got doing legs less and the quality of
Yes.
my workouts were better. I mean, let me tell you, you know.
I know. And again, I think both of us knew because at this point, again, from like an educational
Yeah.
standpoint, we knew it. And I was helping individuals through their own journey, but it's sometimes more challenging when it's yourself, I guess. It's sometimes more challenging to put it into play with everything. So
To
yeah.
eat your words, pun intended.
Yes. Where do
And
you, oh yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, and that's why Chelsea and I say everything in moderation, people.
Absolutely. Yes. Sophie, how do you feel like your job now? So, running your own business, working for yourself, how has that impacted or has that changed your journey with your nutrition and exercise over the past couple of years?
Good question. I mean, like I said, I think I started working out last when I left FFC, and then I was working for someone that I really struggled with as a manager. He was very much a micromanager, and I lost like all desire of working out. So I got a trainer at the time. Like I lost my creativity. So that was definitely like a workload for me. And then when I became my own boss, like 2.5 years ago, I like refound my creativity. I feel like I really found that balance. And I mean, it's just exhausting working for yourself. So I like found the balance of, okay, I'm going to lift like 5 days a week, and that's like perfect. And nutrition became a little more difficult. Chelsea knows, you all know, I don't eat enough, but now it's not on purpose, and I'm trying to eat more. And
You're
it's just,
knowledgeable of it. You know it's happening.
yes,
You're not, it's a work in progress. It's not like you're purposefully doing that.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like being on the go all the time, as Chelsea knows, and being in front of people. It's like I can't just sit down and have a meal like
Yeah.
for breakfast or dinner all the time. So like it's still that's probably what I'm working on the most. And then probably working with clients, kind of with my own personal journey, is really trying to get to know the person and to figure out how and why they are the way they are with their fitness and nutrition, and trying to really help them to their core so they can make permanent, good, happy changes and live life in moderation like we are.
Yes. I love that so much.
How about you, Chelsea? What you got
I
going on?
I feel like, as you had said, you put it so well. I feel like we live in parallel so much with all of this. It's kind of crazy talking about it. But yeah, so like I said, so my big switch, I feel like for myself was around the time of my hip surgery. And that's just when I reassessed like where do I want to go with my body? Where do I want to go with my eating and all that type of stuff? But I would say in the past couple of years, my mindset hasn't fully switched in terms of like nutrition and exercise, but I do think it's just grown in a little bit of a different direction. And I think that a lot of that comes from the work that I do. So when I was working at a gym, and even going backwards a little bit, I started out as a dietitian in a hospital, and then I worked in the gym setting for almost 6 years. And in both of those settings, not as much the gym, I would say more in the hospital setting, but a lot in the gym too. A lot of what I was doing was so science based. And don't get me wrong, nutrition is still science based. I definitely am like evidence-based nutrition, dietitian all the way, but it was like so numbers and science focused. In the hospital, for example, like when I was calculating tube feedings for people and TPN, and a lot of my job was like, okay, I carried a calculator, you are in front of a computer and you're like doing math stuff all the days, all day. So like a lot of numbers. And then in the gym setting, it was a lot of like weight loss. People wanted measurements, RMR testing, so lots of numbers in terms of like how many calories is your body burning a day. I worked with a lot of endurance athletes, so it was a lot more mathematical, and kind of like you were saying, Sophie, is now getting to know my clients a little bit more, being able to spend more time with my clients is getting to more of the root cause or their challenges just to help make more lifestyle changes. I worked with amazing people at the gym, but I do have to say some of the individuals I worked with did have very like short-term goals. And once those short-term goals were reached, you know, I have a wedding or I have a marathon or I have an event or I have something. And once those were reached, it was kind of like everything fell off. And now what I really work with clients is lifestyle change. So if you want to lose weight, I'm here to support you. If you want to run a marathon, I'm here to support you. But it's the question of how is that going to impact you in the long run? And I think through changing my work life, it's also changed my day-to-day life and my personal life too, because again, I do look at the long picture of, okay, kind of like you were saying with what you were doing with your body even a long time ago, is like looking at my body as like, what can it do? What can it accomplish? What can it provide versus looking at like, what size of clothes do I wear? Or you know, just really looking at like more body positivity and how to really nourish yourself from the inside out versus looking at yourself from the outside in. I don't know if it's because of the age of clients that I work with. I work with a range of clients, so I don't want to say I work with one client, but a lot of who I was working with in the gym were in their young 20s. So again, very, I feel like physical focused in terms of I want to fit in this size of clothes. I want to look this way. I also think that was just the setting I was into. But now it's like I work with people who are later 20s all the way into their 60s. I have even worked with people a little bit older than that as well. And again, especially the individuals that are in their late 20s, 30s, and 40s are really starting to look at longevity of, okay, yes, I still want to feel good. I still want to look good. All of that's still important to me, but I also want my body to function at a prime state. So I think working with clients through that has really helped me through my journey as well. And also why I'm starting a new program with individuals too that we can take a couple of minutes and talk about. But before we dive into that, is there anything else from your end that you want to chat about, or any big things with your journey that you feel like is important to say?
Ooh, yes. Tough, but yes. I just want to say Chelsea and I are human. Like, we have our struggles, and no matter what you look like or what you do, you're allowed to struggle and you're not alone. Like, I've had body image issues. It started definitely more post college, and I've worked a lot on those last year and a half. And my therapist was amazing and helped me a ton because I feel like I need to be a billboard for my business because, well, clients actually say that to me. And I'm like, great, thanks, guys. Little do you know the impact it has on, us. But, take your time with things, give yourself grace. And we are so much more than our bodies. Like, as much as I would love to be ripped and jacked and have a six pack, like, I also like to eat pizza and have cookies and bake. And there's social things that happen around those things that are like really important. And
100%.
Yeah, and I'm always here for anyone that wants to talk, or if you need a therapist recommendation, let me know. And I'm sure Chelsea and I are going to do a social media body image podcast, and I'll dive more into that then.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thanks for sharing that. That was like put perfectly in terms of just everything that you said, but so true. I mean, you're right. I think a lot of people have physical goals, and of course, we're here to support your physical goals. But I think the big picture with Sophie and I are how do we do that in a realistic way to fit with your lifestyle? So changing
Yes,
small habits, it is a process. It does take time, as you guys have heard. I mean, both Sophie and I are in our did you turn 30, right?
I'm 30.
Oh my gosh, I was gonna say, like, don't worry, I turned 30 in a couple of days. So like I don't even know why I'm being like, oh my gosh, I'm still 29. So 2 30-year-olds, we have had a lot in our journeys, and I'm sure we'll still have more in our journeys when we both maybe have a family someday or whatever the situation might be. We're running our business for 20 plus years, you never
Yes.
know. So yeah, so we're always here for you. We'll wrap it up and talk about a food for thought. But before we do that, I will just let everybody know that I am starting a new program in August. So right around the corner. It's going to be the first round of this program. It is called Newly Female Foundation. So I'm really, really excited. So for all my women out there, if you could relate to anything that we had talked about today. So if you're going through your own journey, you have a history of a journey that you're just trying to work through, you're going through a life transition, such as a move, you've recently had a baby, you recently got married, or you're just trying to like change seasons in terms of you're just in a hard place with knowing what to do with food and exercise and stress and sleep and all of those lifestyle things. So, this is a 12-week program where we are really just working on the foundations, which is why it's in the name, Newly Female Foundations of your health. So, talking about nutrition and mental health, hormone health, which goes into, of course, women's health a little bit, gut health, balancing your nutrition with your lifestyle. So, again, if you're on the go, if you're raising a family, kind of figuring out that balance for you with where you are in life. So, if you feel like you need some extra support, accountability, please reach out and let me know. We can link the link to the program in the bio of our podcast. And if you aren't able to join in this round, still feel free to fill out the interest form and we can put you on the wait list for the next round of this program. So I know you kind of already said it a little bit, but in terms of like food for thought, is there anything you want people to take away from this?
Always give yourself grace and try and, think about your journey and figure out maybe why you are the way you are and almost see yourself from the outside. And I feel like that helps you just be more aware of yourself and maybe your patterns and remember you're human and, call on some friends for support or whatever you need.
Yeah. And us too, calling us if you need support. And you had said a really good thing, I'll just point out too, is looking back at your past, looking at your childhood, looking at high school, looking at college, whatever your journey is. Of course, you can't go and change the past, and we understand that. But it can help you become more aware of why your journey is your journey, why maybe your challenges that you're having are your challenges, and it can just bring a little bit more awareness, and then that can help with self-acceptance too. So, big takeaway is to give yourself grace, as Sophie had said, and just learn a little bit more about your journey. Thanks for tuning in and have a good rest of the day.
Bye, everybody.